You're standing in the philosophy section of a bookstore, completely overwhelmed. The spines stretch forever. Plato, Aristotle, Nietzsche, Sartre. You pick up one book, read 3 pages, and put it back. Too dense, too abstract, too far removed from your actual life. But here's the thing. Philosophy isn't meant to stay locked in dusty academic volumes. The best philosophy books for beginners do something radical. They take massive questions about meaning, ethics, how to live, and they make them feel urgent and real. Not because they dumb anything down, but because they remember that ideas matter most when they connect to us. Today, we're counting down 5 philosophy books that actually changed how people think. These aren't the hardest philosophy books ever written. These are the ones that opened the door, made sense, and stuck with readers long after they finished. Let's start. Number 5, Sophie's World by Justine Garter. Sophie's World is technically a novel. A girl named Sophie starts receiving mysterious letters asking her impossible questions. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why do you exist? As she tries to answer them, her philosophy teacher begins telling her the entire history of Western philosophy, from the pre-Socratics all the way to modern times. What makes this book revolutionary for beginners is that it doesn't lecture you. It tells a story. You follow Sophie as she discovers Socrates, then Plato, then the Stoics, then Descartes. Each philosopher arrives exactly when you need them to understand the next piece of the puzzle. The core promise of Sophie's World isn't just to teach you philosophy. It's to remind you that you are already a philosopher. Everyone is. Because everyone asks the same questions Sophie does. They just stop asking them. Readers often say this book changed the way they see everyday objects and conversations. You start wondering about the nature of things. You start noticing when you're accepting ideas without questioning them. It's perfect if you've never read philosophy before and you want the full historical arc without the density. Number 4, The Problems of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell wrote this book in 1912 as an introduction to philosophy for people who had never encountered it before. More than a century later, it remains one of the clearest entry points ever written. Russell's central idea is radical. The value of philosophy doesn't lie in definite answers. It lies in the enlargement of your sense of possibility. Philosophy teaches you to question things you thought were certain. It breaks down the walls of your everyday assumptions. In this book, Russell guides you through core philosophical questions. What is matter? What is mind? What is knowledge? Does God exist? But here's what's brilliant. He doesn't answer these questions. He shows you how to think about them. He shows you what frameworks philosophers have used. One specific concept Russell emphasizes is the distinction between appearance and reality. Everything you perceive seems solid and certain. But physics shows you that what appears to be solid matter is mostly empty space. This realization alone shifts how you experience the world. This book is perfect for you if you want a rigorous but readable introduction. Russell's prose is crystalline. He assumes no background knowledge, and he's honest about what philosophy can and cannot do. It's short, around 150 pages, and you can finish it in an afternoon. Number 3, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps during World War II. This book is part memoir, part philosophical treatise, and entirely transformative. Frankl's core argument is this: suffering is inevitable in life. But what matters is not whether you suffer. What matters is whether you find meaning in your suffering. He calls this logotherapy, the idea that the primary human motivation is not pleasure or power, but the search for meaning. In the camps, those who survived were not always the physically strongest. They were the ones who found a reason to live, a project to finish, a person to see again, a contribution they still had to make. Frankl then expands this into a philosophy of meaning applicable to your life. Even in situations of extreme limitation, he argues, you maintain the freedom to choose your attitude. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can always choose what it means. Readers describe this book as life-changing because it reframes suffering not as something to escape, but as something to extract meaning from. It's perfect for anyone going through difficulty. Number 2, The Nicomachean Ethics by Aristotle. Aristotle's ethics might sound intimidating. It was written 2,400 years ago. It's translated from ancient Greek, but here's the secret. Aristotle wrote this book for his son. It's a guide to living a good life, and it reads more like advice from a wise mentor than dense theory. Aristotle's central claim is deceptively simple. Everything aims at some good. Food aims at nourishment. Medicine aims at health. And humans, as humans, aim at eudaimonia, often translated as happiness or flourishing. But Aristotle doesn't mean happiness as fleeting pleasure. He means the deep satisfaction that comes from living according to your nature and developing your talents fully. He calls this excellence or virtue. One core framework Aristotle teaches is the doctrine of the mean. Virtue sits between two extremes. Courage, for example, is the mean between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity is the mean between stinginess and wasteful spending. Every virtue is a balance. Another key concept is habit. You don't become virtuous by thinking about virtue. You become virtuous by practicing virtuous actions repeatedly until they become second nature. This resonates deeply with modern readers because it aligns with what we now know about habit formation. This book is perfect for anyone asking, how should I actually live? Not theoretically, but practically. What does a good life look like? What habits should I cultivate? Aristotle answers these questions with clarity and specificity that feels relevant 24 centuries later. And finally, number 1, The Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. Wait, before you close this video, Kant is notoriously difficult. The Critique of Pure Reason is 700 pages of dense argumentation. But it's number 1 for a specific reason. It fundamentally changed how Western thought works. Kant asked a radical question that no philosopher before him had asked in quite this way. How do we actually know anything? Not just what do we know, but how is knowledge possible at all? His answer was revolutionary. We don't passively perceive the world, we actively structure it. Our minds come equipped with categories like space, time, and causality. These aren't properties of the world itself, they're structures our minds impose on experience. Why does this matter? Because once you understand Kant's argument, you realize that your experience of the world is not the same as the world itself. What you see is filtered through the structure of your mind. This doesn't mean the world is an illusion. It means your perception is an interpretation. One core concept Kant introduces is the distinction between phenomena and noumena. Phenomena are things as they appear to us. Noumena are things as they are in themselves, independent of our perception. We can only ever know phenomena. The noumena remain forever beyond our grasp. Now, reading the full critique is genuinely difficult. The prose is dense. The arguments are intricate, but readers who push through report that their mind literally expands. They start seeing the world differently. They understand why subsequent philosophy had to grapple with Kant's insights. For this reason, Kant belongs on the list, not because it's easy, but because it's genuinely transformative. Start with secondary sources if you need to. Read commentaries that explain Kant's ideas, then return to the original. But start your philosophy journey knowing that this book exists, and that someday you might be ready for it. Here's what all 5 of these books have in common. They take seriously the idea that how you think matters. They assume you're capable of deep thought. They treat your questions as legitimate. That's the core insight that unites them. Philosophy isn't an academic discipline locked away in universities. It's a fundamental human activity. It's asking questions about how to live, what to value, what's real, and what we can know. If you've never read philosophy before, start with Sophie's World or Russell. If you want something shorter and more personal, pick up Man's Search for Meaning. If you want practical wisdom about living well, read Aristotle. And when you're ready to stretch yourself, tackle Kant. All the links to these books are in the description below. Pick one. Start this week. Your thinking